Hi, this is Lesson 1, Level 3. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about alternative harmony for both the A and the B section and some ideas of tritone substitution. I've talked about tritone substitution previously and you can learn more about that in Jazz Snippets, but I'll just go over the basis for that particular process. So a tritone substitution is substituting a chord for a chord a tritone away, tritone being 3 tones. So for example, the first chord in the middle 8 of Honeysuckle Rose is F7. So a tritone away from F is a B. The important notes in F are the third, which is A, and the E flat, which is the 7th. And when I play a tritone, a B in the left hand, but keep the same chord, we have the same chord type, a dominant 7th, but whereas A had been the third of F, it's now the 7th, and the D sharp, which had been the E flat, because that's the same note, of F had been the 7th, it's now the third. So we can move between those two chords with ease. Now they tend to be used in certain sequences where it sounds like you've got chromatic movement, and so the sound on the ears is very natural. It would sound like this in the middle 8. So here's a bar of F7, then I go to the tritone substitute of B7, and then I go to B flat 7, and then I go to G7, and then the tritone away from C7, G7 is D flat 7, and then I go to C7. So I've used some tritone substitutions there. I was just messing about and thinking about how I would move from B flat to G, because they're not in the same sequence, they don't move by fifths. And I found myself just moving down a tone. I'll explain how that could be an interesting substitution. So F7, tritone, B7, B flat 7, and to get to G flat, I literally just go down a tone to A flat 7, G7, and then a tritone from G is D flat 7, then C7. So I'm using tritone substitutions there, and I'm going to just improvise with those implied harmonies. Okay. And so you can hear that just feels like more movement. It doesn't sound like I'm playing outside the harmonies. What about if I don't play the tritones, I just imply them and play the chords, so sticking to the original chords. Let's have a listen. Does it work? Who knows? And the answer is, it sounds pretty cool. And that's because I focused on the important notes, so I'm still bringing out the same notes that I bring out in F7, which is the A and the E flat, but when I put a B in the bass, it sounds quite good. Obviously, there are similarities between those two keys, and some of the notes I brought up were actually the sharp 11, which is the B, and then we got the flat 13. And actually, when I think of notes from the tritone, I'm actually often using notes from the altered scale. So there's a definite correlation between thinking of the tritones and the altered scale, and the altered scale again is in my jazz snippets, but it's essentially half a diminished scale and half of a whole tone scale, or it's the 7th mode of the melodic minor, so it's actually derived from F sharp melodic minor. That's the middle 8, and those are some kind of, that's a start of tritone substitution in that particular lesson. In the next lesson, I'm going to deal with the A section, putting in some tritone substitutions there. So join me for that, and I'll probably look at some more tritone substitution also for the B section. So join me for lesson 2, level 3.